Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I am your host, Brian Karem, and with me today, Sturgis Stage Screen, and let's see, best-selling author, doctor, well-known podcaster, very good friend, my little sister. I say it all the time. I love her to death. Mary Trump. Mary, thanks for joining me.
I am always excited to be with you, Brian, even under these difficult circumstances, or especially under these difficult circumstances, I should say.
Yes, it's always good to have a laugh with someone as we're headed to the slaughterhouse.
As Rome burns, yes.
So the reason why I wanted to talk to you today is I started out, I told you, it's a saying from Isaac Asimov. Salvor Hardin in the Foundation series says, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. We have a president who's violent and incompetent and has threatened. Now, this morning, the breaking news is Donald has decided not to use violence against our allies in Europe, a Europe that we built with the Marshall Plan after World War II and built NATO to stop Russian hegemony, Soviet hegemony, now Russian hegemony. So the reason why I just wanted to ask you your take on Donnie these days. You and I have talked about since the first of the year. I mean, I thought it was off the rails. Now I don't know where we are.
Yes, I mean, to say that it's off the rails is to suggest that there are rails. And I don't think there are rails.
What
there
rails?
Are no rails. What is this thing you call rails? So I'm a little surprised that the takeaway from the sheer insanity that we witnessed at Davos today is that he's decided out of out of the kindness of his non-existent heart, not to attack Greenland or not to take over Greenland with force. I don't actually think that's what he. I don't think that's the takeaway.
What do you think the takeaway is?
Well, one, he's out of his mind, and I mean this in all seriousness. I'm not just joking around here. He's a deeply unwell man. He is delusional. He is violent, and he is literally on the brink of destroying the Western Alliance, the post-World War II Western Alliance, just as he is well on his way to destroying some of the most important American institutions, like the Department of Justice, and specifically the Civil Rights Division. So I don't know that I do know. We can't take this person at his word. So this is actually what he said. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the U.S. is asking for is a place called Greenland, or as he said about 20 times, Iceland. So I don't think that that's a promise not to use force. What I think that is his shockingly accurate recognition that he doesn't actually have to use force to get Greenland.
Right.
And I don't think the words leading up to that, you guys are so ungrateful. Without us, NATO wouldn't be anything. You owe us. You owe us. You owe us. This national security of the security of the whole world is at stake unless we have Greenland, because again, this is somebody who doesn't understand how alliances work, apparently. I'm sorry, just because he said, at the very end, I'm not going to use force. It doesn't mean he's not going to, because he wants Greenland.
Right. Well, God, I want to dissect that in so many ways. You use two words here: delusional, destructive. I remember asking him, shouting at him, why was he so delusional? And he got pissed off at me. Why is he so delusional that he lost? And he won't admit that he lost. Delusional has been the touchstone for him since I began covering him, I think. But you made the Greenland thing. I will remind why I have to go back to this because I think people miss this point. But Greenland is important, vital to our security now, because of the fact of climate change has created new shipping lanes in Greenland in the North Atlantic. Donald Trump is acknowledging that climate change exists by having to change our international policy and security concerns, while at the same time calling climate change the biggest scam in history. And for anyone capable of cogent thought, that to me sounds like, newspeak, from 1984. So I go to that, but when he talks about, when you talk about he's unwell, I see him unwell physically and mentally compared to the first administration. And I thought he was fading towards the end of the first administration. But I point to two things in the last month and a half: the rapid fire yelling at us speech, the Christmas speech from the diplomatic room, I think it was, or diplomatic reception room. And then one of his rare appearances in the briefing room this week when he just rambled.
Yes, it was yesterday, by the way.
Oh my God, it seems like a month ago. But
I know.
But I mean, take a look at that rambling monologue. I mean, first thing I thought of course, was The Incredibles, and I thought of the "Oh, you sly dog, you caught me monologuing." He monologued for an hour and a half, and none of it made any sense.
None.
I mean, at one point in time, he said, and I think the quote I have here somewhere is, "I fixed DC, and now you can walk there, like real lovers and do what real lovers do."
Yes.
What the hell does that mean?
I don't want to know. The fact that word came out of his mouth sickens me.
So you have the clinical training. I know you've said it for a while. There's no worst with Donald. It only gets worse. How much worse is it going to get?
I was going to say the sky's the limit, but we should be going the other direction. There's no low, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know, the molten center of the planet, maybe. I don't know. So,
well, we're a hot country.
We are so hot, getting hotter by the minute, because climate change is a thing. I think the two. Somebody said this to me yesterday, because as we know, sadly, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of his inauguration, and there have been lots of recaps, and I've been trying to think about how to write about it. Do I really want to go through a laundry list of the horrors? No, I don't. I think people are sick of it, and somebody said to me, if you really want to know, if you want a recap of the last year, just look at that press conference. Because it is just because I think it's less what he's done, although that's extremely important. Because remember, everything he's done is with the complicity of many, many people, corrupt illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court, the entirety of the Republican Party, his inner circle, everybody in the executive branch. But in terms of who he is, how he behaves, the things he's fixated upon, his delusions, his worsening by the day psychiatric disorders, his cognitive decline, his physical health, as you've mentioned, it's all right there. And then today, in Davos, on a world stage, humiliating the United States even further, we literally watched, well, not literally, because that would be disgusting, but we metaphorically watched as Donald's brain melted out of his ears. I mean, this is very treacherous territory, because the only people who can rein him in won't.
Yes.
I defy anybody to watch either one or both of those things, the press conference yesterday and Davos today, and tell me that this is somebody who is fit to lead anything, let alone the United States of America. He's got to be removed from office. Failing that, the only hope we have is that leaders of the EU and Canada and any other of our allies who can muster the courage stand together, and in a way that corporate America and American universities and white shoe law firms haven't, and just say enough and no more. And I think we saw that with remarks, shockingly, from Maloney. It's like, fine, you think you don't want to be in NATO anymore? Remove your bases. We'll boycott you. We'll tariff you. We'll rip up our trade deals that are to your benefit, all that stuff. So between her remarks and Macron and Canada, Carney in Canada, I have, that is literally the only hope, Brian, I think at this point, because I don't know who it was who said
Those
it.
outside of the United States, leadership
Yeah,
outside of the United
yeah,
States.
yes.
Because I like you, I look at, all right, I mean, his claim of ending 8 wars and and he
I mean,
stopped.
he can't even pronounce Azerbaijan, so I'm not sure he actually should get credit for
Well,
ending a
I like
war
the
of a
part where he
country.
says he stopped a couple of pre-wars. Well, pre-wars are peace. So what the hell does
Is
that
that
mean?
like a pre-cog? Like what? It's
Yes.
like a pre-crime? I don't understand.
Defeating inflation.
He's the
Gas,
Minority Report president.
yes. And the gas isn't $1.99 a gallon anywhere still, and he's passed that. He's said that for a year now. I I I wonder. There are 3 ways. If he doesn't, he could make it to the end of his term. He could die before the end of his term. He could have the 25th Amendment used before the end of his term. He could be impeached and convicted before the end of his term. I think the likeliest scenario is that he goes, face down in his morning cereal or face down in a hamburger before the end of his term. If he leaves before the end of his term, because I can't see anybody, as you said, they are enablers. I don't see anyone unless he's on his back babbling like a cicada. But then again, I would
Sorry.
like you. I watched the thing in Davos. I watched the press briefing. He looked like a cicada babbling incoherently on stage. It was all word salad. None of it made any damn sense. So I don't see that happening, and I certainly don't see the Democrats being able. I will only say this: if they decide to impeach Donald Trump, someone's whipped the votes in the Senate and know they have a conviction. Otherwise, why go through the process?
Yeah, because if they were to do that and not convict him, then wow, the way he would
Again,
rampage through the Republican Party, and I think Bill Cassidy is a sort of an object lesson in what happens, even if you grovel and throw away your reputation, as Cassidy did, and he deserves whatever he gets. But if you've crossed Donald at any point, you're going to get primaried or what have you. And this Republican Party cares more about its own, or I should say, the members of this Republican Party, elected officials in the Republican Party, clearly care more about their own power than they care about anything else. It's alarming, but when you have that kind of situation, there isn't going to be any pushback because Donald has the power and the pettiness and apparently nothing better to do than go after everybody who, in his view, is a personal or political enemy.
yes, and I don't see him giving up his revenge tour for anything that would be remotely presidential. That would help
Yeah.
the rest of us.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only hope is that Democrats start pounding the drum and start making it like every single day saying, this man is out of his mind. The Republicans know it. They talk about it behind his back. And again, I defy anybody to listen to anything he said in either one of these long, rambling, incoherent, delusional speeches and tell me that everything is just fine and that he is a legitimate leader who is cognitively intact and understands what's going on around him. I defy anybody to defend his remarks or his state of mind.
Well, to your point, now privately, and as a colleague of mine once said, senators and congressmen are notoriously brave in private and less so publicly.
Yes.
But privately,
well, that's another way of saying they're cowards, but okay.
Yes, yeah, you've got it. But to his point, privately they say that Donnie's lost his freaking mind, but publicly they still support him because they want to get reelected and they have their own self-interest. He's effectively neutered Congress. But like you, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm so tired of people saying He's crazy. I know he's crazy. I've seen the craziness. You don't have to tell me. I've stood 5 feet from the guy. At one point in time, standing in the East Room, and this was in his first administration, I asked him a question, and he winked at me, and goes, and I'm going, wait a minute, are we dating now? I mean, what the hell's going on?
I mean, dinner first.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Answer the question first. But and so I know he's nuts, but your point at people are going, will there be a midterm? I believe there will be, but I believe he's going to try and suppress the vote as much as possible, and using Stephen Miller's ICE, brigade,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to try to make sure that in blue cities and blue states, the voting is down. I think that will backfire. I think he could try to seize the ballot boxes. He's already said that he will. And I also believe that anytime Donald says something and people go, oh, he's just joking, I always caution, no, he's not. These are trial balloons. If he can get away with it, he will. But what do you recommend? Because I think people want a path forward. And I say get out and vote, but organize, help people vote, volunteer at precincts. You're going to have to be more involved in this election than any in your life. And I also have said that I believe this could be the last time we get an election if we don't. And maybe I'm overstating it, but I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, if we lose, it will definitely be the last time there's an election. So that should be motivating for people. I mean, I agree. I'm so tired of just hearing people talk about how crazy he is. I think it's important though, because a lot of people don't know that. They're not watching the Davos speech. They're not watching the press conference yesterday. So if you're going to talk about his mental illness, or his cognitive decline or what have you, point out the ways in which he's crazy and the ways in which those are dangerous. Do you really want somebody in charge of the country who is detached from reality and suffers from delusions and is many times incomprehensible and doesn't remember things, and on and on and on. The other thing I would point out to people is let's make sure this doesn't get normalized. So, because that's what corporate media has done for a decade now. Well, more than that. That's what the Republican Party has done. They have normalized the deeply abnormal, the corruption, the anti-American, unconstitutional incursions into our civil liberties, and all that article in the Times. Donald and his grotesquely useless children have accrued over $1 trillion. Like, I saw that number. It's like, that cannot be a real number. It cannot be a real number, but it is. But because
more real than any numbers that Don gives us. But
well, true. But I mean, so that level of grift, the ways in which that kind of financial corruption puts this country, like, it really endangers our national security because of all the quid pro quos. He's being paid by sometimes less than sometimes hostile states to enrich himself personally. And like, what, Saudi Arabia is getting lots of fighter jets and tanks or whatever. I mean, this is deeply troubling. But also, I think we need to start making the case that to people that we are on the brink of things that were unthinkable even 2 years ago. We are looking at the destruction of the post-World War II order, the destruction of the Western Alliance, which, as troubled as it has been in some ways, is one of the greatest advancements in human history. We are living in a country in which our civil liberties in certain places have been taken away. We have the threat of deploying active military on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens. When did we ever, like in the last, say, 10 years, when were we ever concerned about either one of those things? The answer is never. And all of a sudden we are, because one madman has been allowed to ascend to power again, and an entire party and the supermajority of the Supreme Court is letting it happen. So, and that's the other thing. He's not the problem. They are. Anybody, like we said, he's a symptom. Again, anybody who looks at these speeches and is willing to overlook his insanity and his delusion, because he's at Davos talking about the 2020 election being rigged.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like that's something they care about, or believe. So again, any Republican, anybody who is not willing to take a stand after this, well, they are even more to blame. And we need to shift our focus away from him to the people who actually could do something about it.
Well, that would be nice. My concern, I've said this often, is we have, two political parties in this country. One has no heart and one has no head. I'm concerned about the Democrats being able to affect that pushback.
Yeah, well, then we need better Democrats.
There you go. So when are you running? I'll help you. Yeah, the only thing I'd be running for is the bar. I'm not or the border. I would say that as a joke, but people will go nuts. But but it does leave me with this question as we underline all the things, and I was just going over the Davos speech as we before we started talking, and he's talking about immediate negotiations that cost hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and so we should run it. There is a transactional element to Donald Trump that I think people forget because they believe that he has some actual ethos to what he's doing, and the only ethos is give me what I want. I see nothing more than a transaction involved in everything that he does. I don't think people see it. And I also am concerned, as you said, my real concern is about some of the Republicans who know better and some who fled the Republican Party and did not stand up to him and left instead of, and I understand why, but because they felt like they were no longer wanted or needed. But how many people have actually stood up to Don?
Who could actually have an impact?
Yeah.
None. And that's the problem. And that's why it is crucially important, because look, it doesn't matter if you and I do, it doesn't matter. I mean, let me rephrase that. You and I aren't going to have an impact on his behavior.
Right.
But, people like us can hopefully encourage other people to stand up as well. But we're not people we're people Donald sues, but we're not people he pays attention to in the sense that
press passes or
like he pays attention to us so that he to the point that to the extent that he wants to shut us up and sue us, but nothing I say or nothing you say is going to make him change, or we're not going to be able to stop anything he's doing. So the people who actually would have some kind of influence or power are the ones who are failing so miserably. And again, their inability or unwillingness to stand up, even in the face of obvious, just the corruption and the breathtaking assault on American citizens and our institutions. And look what he's done to the civil service, on and on and on. But even his deteriorating in real time, like none of that is enough. So that's why it is critically important that actors outside of the United States, like I wish that during that speech or whatever it was, that may still be going on for all I know at Davos, they had all stood up, turned their backs on him, and walked out of the room while booing. Because that's what he deseres. And again, Brian, this is the other thing.
Or at least fall asleep like he does, but go ahead.
I think he was asleep during much of that speech. This is what's been driving me crazy for years. And I started talking about this in 2020. If everybody stood up to him, he would fold like a cheap suit, as the saying goes. I just made myself sound like I'm 90. But think about the auto worker at the Ford plant in Detroit who called him a pedo protector, and the thin-skinned little baby with no impulse control flipped him off and said "fuck you" to him twice. That's the president of the United States. Now imagine if everybody in that crowd had started chanting. Same thing. Like imagine if every white shoe law firm, every university, every corporate media had told him to fuck off. Everything exactly. Every had stood united. If at the very beginning of this tariff insanity, every single one of our trading partners had united and said, you know what, we're going to impose insane tariffs on you too. And we will just create different trading alliances, because we are at the point now where the best thing that could happen, like, unless by some miracle he got removed from office tomorrow and the Republican Party was out of power, that's not going to happen. The best scenario right now is for the EU and Canada and other countries to band together and refuse to trade with us and create other alliances, box us out, and weaken us, because we don't deserve to have the power. We don't deserve to have the influence. And thanks to
it's our arrogance and our ignorance that bothers me the most. And when you talk about standing up, this is my own personal gripe, is when people, I want to get your take on corporate media, how that's when I have like 3 questions left I got to hit you with, but that was one of them. But I got to say, what angered me the most was when people today go, why doesn't, the press doesn't do anything, why don't we do anything? Well, he's engineered it so you can't. But my argument with the press is, and I'm a member of it and have been that's been my chosen profession for 40 years. And not showing my age, I'm still 19, but I'm standing there and I'm going, why didn't anybody learn from what we did the first time? No reporter pushes back. No one says, wait a minute, you didn't answer the question. No one says, hey, why did you disrespect this reporter? Why are you saying piggy? Peter Alexander stood up for Jim Acosta during the midterm, after the first midterms in his first administration, when he went after Jim. Peter said, hey, he's a good reporter, stop that. And Trump went after Peter. When I stood up against him, and there were others that stood up, and I remember 3 or 4 in particular who helped me out. But we don't even do that in the briefing room. We don't even go, hey, that was a good question, why don't you answer it? As soon as it's a lot of fealty being shown, and I know he's engineered it. Like, for example, he's engineered it so Reuters, the 2 best reporters there, Jeff Mason and Holland, Steve Holland. And then, he goes after CNN all the time. AP is X'd out. They're not he's replaced it with sycophants, but there still are a few people in that room, and they never push back. And I don't know. To me, that's the most frustrating part of this. You didn't learn from the first time. As you said, I stood up to him and I beat him in court 3 times. He hates me, but Jim stood up against him. April Ryan stood up against him. All these people did, and no one seems to remember it or do anything about it. And I think that's partly engineered because of who's hiring whom. But I would also ask you, because you point out something that I really want to solve. What do you think needs to be done to solve the media problem?
Well, part of that, part of the reason we're in the jam we're in is because when it would have made a difference and reporters had stood together, they didn't, as you pointed out. So, seriously, if a reporter asked a legitimate question, he refused to answer it and then insulted them, and he went to the next person. The next person should have asked the same question, and on and on and on. Now, the press room is full of hacks,
propaganda,
handpicked hacks who aren't journalists. Yes, they're propagandists. So they're not going to stand up to for the few legitimate journalists who are still allowed in that room. And I think a big part of it too is a big problem, I should say, is the ways in which Donald's remarks or actions are characterized. The New York Times, for example, is basically the subhead on, Donald says he won't use force but demands Greenland. The subhead is Donald issues strong warning to Europe at Davos. Is that what he did, Brian? Is that what he did? No, he was ranting like a lunatic and making completely false, ahistorical claims about what, I mean, really, that's normalizing the insanity. So I think we're a long ways away from the time when we could make any real differences because there's so much money involved. And as you talk about all the time, local media has been essentially destroyed. I can't even say decimated at this point. It's all, we have to go all in on independent media. And the fact that Democrats or people on the left still haven't learned that lesson is mind blowing to me. You know, get an independent media outlet and start throwing money at them so they can grow and build and influence. And it's not happening. And I remain mystified because there are two reasons why we got here. I mean, there are more than that, but two main reasons we're here right now is because the Democrats never understood the importance of the Supreme Court and never conveyed to voters how that's the one issue they should be voting on because it contains every other issue. And the Democrats' failure to recognize the importance of creating a media infrastructure.
God bless you. You're, from your mouth to God's ears. I have been trying. Honestly, the only person who has said that they would put in for independent media that I've talked to, of the many people I've spoken to, is Anthony Scaramucci. Other than that, I can't. And he's not a Democrat, as you said.
Is he rich?
Yeah.
Give him my number.
Yeah,
Don't.
No. Mooch, okay. How you doing? Listen. No. So the other question but you're so, I mean, you've really kind of hit the nail on the head. Independent media, break up media monopolies, independent media, and make sure that there's, we go after vetted factual information. As you said, as you have said, and I love the quote because it's actually in an upcoming documentary that somebody produced. But when you said, when you said bias towards democracy, unbiased towards vetting facts, and that to me is the key to journalism, and we're not doing it very well. With that said, I guess the question I got to ask you this. If Donnie was sitting across from you right now, what's the one thing you would want to ask him or say to him?
I would say to him, I am so sorry nobody ever loved you. Because that's why we're here. And
okay.
That's why he is who he is.
You opened it. I've got to say this then. It's just me maybe, but many times, and I mean, I have colleagues and friends and relatives who have said that they're Donald Trump fans. And I go back to when I was with America's Most Wanted, and I interviewed a lot of killers. I mean, in prison, serial killers that were caught, criminals that were caught, and they were all as different as anyone, all very different people. But they all shared one thing in common, and that was a lack of a father or an abusive father. And every one of the people that I know well that are still Donald Trump fans all share that in common. And I'm not casting aspersions on them, but they're looking for a daddy in their life. But it seems to me that that's what Don's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've said this. I think I wrote about this in my first book. When Donald talks about how great he is and how all these amazing things he did, because again, one of the most embarrassing things about this press conference yesterday is that his staff put together a document that was called accomplishments. Like, okay. Anyway, anytime he touts his fictional accomplishments and it's the best, it's the greatest, whatever, he's talking to my grandfather. Because that's the person he's still afraid of and still trying to prove his worth so that my grandfather won't kill him off. And the fact that my grandfather has been dead for almost 30 years now is alarming because that's literally Donald's audience of one, his dead father.
Wow. That speaks volumes.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then the question naturally follows, if that's his,
Who's
if
going to commit him? I don't know.
that's,
Too many people are making way too much money off of him. So
well, yeah, that's the other thing that concerns me. But but when you say, that no one loved him, I honestly feel that in his presence. He feels, and that quote that he gave, I think it was the same time. No, it was Peter Ducey from Fox who asked him on Air Force One about getting to heaven, and he said, "I don't think I'm going to heaven." That may be the most honest thing I've ever heard Don say, but but what was your take from that?
that actually is one of the few things that surprised me because we were not a religious people, and Donald doesn't believe in heaven or hell. He doesn't believe in a higher. He is the higher power, right? He also he doesn't believe. He's a nihilist. He does not believe that anything either can or should exist beyond him, which is why we are going to be in so much trouble when he starts realizing, if he starts realizing that he's coming to the end of something. Now, I either mean his life or his tenure, or, you know, I don't know that that's a possibility anymore because clearly he's never going to be held accountable legally for all
Right.
of his many, many
Well,
crimes against humanity. But, if he feels like people are turning on him because they recognize he's not of use to them anymore or what have you, he'll become even more dangerous.
well, yeah, he's a nihilist in a solipsistic universe,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's to me the most frightening aspect of. And I think you're right. When if he ever comes to the realization, it's the old saying, he'd burn down the planet to rule over the ashes, and
Yes.
I
He would
think that,
indeed.
yeah, and I think people are delusional themselves if they don't understand that the man with his finger on the button is the least likely person on the planet to have it, or should have it.
Right. Exactly. And, I think we're seeing he's just part of a trend because all of the tech oligarchs are the same kind of nihilists.
Yes, and they've all built little bunkers so they'll survive the
Yeah.
Holocaust, but we won't.
But they'll still have more money than everybody else. I mean, there won't be anybody else, but they don't seem to care. They just their entire sense of self-worth is bound up in how much they have, which a friend of mine calls the disease of more.
Yes, that's
And
a
the
great
fact that we've
term.
allowed this to happen is something else that we need to rethink if we have the opportunity.
Well, and with that said, and as we come to the end of our time together this afternoon or this morning, what do you do? Here's, I always say, look, rock and roll and music and comedy keep me sane. What do you do? And what do you recommend that people do I mean, on your show every day, you have a moment of peace at
Yeah.
the end of your show. And, and I get it and I'm in for it, but what do you personally do, and what do you recommend that people do to stay? Because I got to tell you, as we began talking this hour, this year already seems like a year long. We're not even out of the first month, right? Right? We're
Yeah.
still. That's
I believe it's the 21st of
January
November, January. Sorry, January.
of
Oh boy.
2026, and it already feels like a year has passed. I mean, with the shooting in Minneapolis, a horrendous thing, with threatening Greenland, with the immigration raids, with Venezuela, all of this in just a few short weeks. It's like, the worst hits of the day. It's like listening to bad rock and roll
Yeah.
incessantly.
Yeah.
But so what do you, and if you'd like to talk about any of those other issues, fine, but I really like to get your take because you've been in the center of this storm for quite a while. So what do you do to get out of it?
Well, first of all, it's called, we do an emotional support moment at the end of the show,
Yes.
and it's a good opportunity to breathe because I think if we stop for a second and really, we probably are holding our breath a lot during these very dark times. So breathing is a thing that kind of matters. So I have struggled a lot over the last few years trying to find ways, and I failed a lot. But last year, for various reasons and in very complicated ways, my life changed dramatically on a personal level. And even though this year I found it very difficult to get out from under the onslaught of the horrors, which because it does feel like on January 1st, this country fell off a cliff and we are in free fall. As bad as last year was, I'm sorry to say this year is already worse, obviously. So I'm not doing a particularly good job of doing the things I urge other people to do: get out in nature, go to a museum, go to a play, whatever. Read a book. Like, seriously, just take a day off, read a book, write a poem, paint a picture, do something creative. But the most important thing I think we all need to do is something that I actually am trying to keep up with, and that's connecting with other people. Like the other day, a friend of mine at last minute was like, "Hey, come join us for breakfast." And it was snowing, and I did. And I'm so glad. Even I had so much work to do, but it's like it's a Saturday. I can take the morning off and go have breakfast with my friends, So that is critically important. And just stay connected, because community is the thing they are trying to destroy. And that is the thing that's going to get us through this. The other stuff is incredibly important too. We need to feed our souls, right? But remembering we're not alone, which is very easy to forget when you're not connecting with other people.
Exactly.
And reaching out or responding when other people reach out to you. I think that is at the top of the list for sure.
Well, that and I agree 1,000,000%. One of Donald Trump's I'd reduce the price of eggs 1,000,000%. In other words, they're paying me to buy them.
Yes, where's my rebate?
Yeah, where's my cut?
I know, I love it, because now I get a check for $1 million every time I get an inhaler, my $700 inhaler. Great.
That's but okay. So I wanted to close on that, but I do want to ask you the two issues: the shooting in Minneapolis, predicted by many, horrific in its scope, and I always say the thing that I've said, I go, just don't talk the politics of this. The politics are horrible, but police procedurally, they follow no known police procedures either before or after. And in fact, the guy who was involved in the shooting, who shot Renee Good, was left the scene of the crime and did not turn over his weapon. And those are all things that police officers do when there's an officer involved shooting. And I've covered dozens of them. And in fact, the first book I ever wrote was about a police officer involved shooting. So I know how these things work. And if you're going to hold them accountable, they're saying, first of all, the vice president of the United States came out instead of the president, which angered me, into the briefing room and said that there will be an investigation, but she was a domestic terrorist. So they already told us the end of the investigation before the investigation occurred. And then we later found that there would be no investigation. Every shooting is investigated. Every police officer shooting is investigated. You don't, and as a police chief told me, Brian, it doesn't matter if he can justify the shooting. You can't justify creating the incident that resulted in the shooting. And that's where it's not the milliseconds where he's trying to decide whether to fire his weapon. It's the actions that they took that precipitated the event that caused him to do so. In all forms, this fails the test. And I think it says something specific about ICE. But as someone on the outside, I wanted to get your take on it.
The simplest thing we need to remember is that this is blood on Donald's hands. Renee Good would not be dead if ICE had not been deployed for no reason, no legitimate reason that I'm aware of. She should still be alive. Jonathan Ross should have been indicted. And the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ used to do these kinds of investigations. And as soon as Harvey Dillon decided not to, and then Todd Blanche told us that they weren't going to be investigating the shooter at all, I think we've entered a very dark territory, and that is the last nail in the coffin of what was left of the once storied Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. but also the danger here is in outside of the illegal deployment of ICE officials and potentially active duty military. It's the response, as you mentioned, of the executive branch, faming the victim, calling her without any evidence whatsoever a domestic terrorist, the DOJ investigating the victim's widow. This is beyond the pale. Why is this so dangerous? Because it's vile. But why is it dangerous? Because it's sending a message to other ICE agents that they too can act with impunity. Because is the lack of training or is the inadequate training of ICE problematic? Yes, it's deeply problematic. What's much more problematic is the poor vetting process. The people who are now signing up for ICE are the people who want to be committing these kinds of acts of violence, and while knowing they can get away with them. They're probably cowards. They're very small men and women. But if they know that they can do something egregious and get away with it, they are more inclined to do so. So that's my take.
Yeah, and then again, the other one from the very beginning of the year. I'll preface this by saying I think it was for the military. What they did in Venezuela was militarily and tactically a success. They will talk to you about how hard it is to get in and breach. But here's the thing. All right, so they go into a heavily fortified compound. They can pull out the leader of another country and bring him back and toss him in a jail in Brooklyn. And of course, there are plenty of people that are happy about that in Venezuela because Maduro was, Donald Trump for Maduro. So Donnie turned on one of his own. But here's the thing that kills me about that. You could take the military and they say they're serving a warrant, right? I've ridden with people when they've served warrants, and that's the most expensive warrant I've ever seen served.
Yeah, no kidding.
I've never been with DEA, FBI, or local and state police serving warrants when they've had Tomahawk missiles with them, and the CIA. So maybe that's just me. But here you go. You've served it. You bring him back. No loss of life. But you can't serve or institute an ICE operation in Minneapolis without the loss of life of an innocent woman. To me, those things are the incongruity in those two, and the chutzpah with the Trump administration to continue to say that what they did in Venezuela was beautifully executed and this woman stopped an ICE operation, just to me sounds completely just bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure that I thought that the reporting suggested that people had been killed in the Venezuela.
None of our people had been killed, and the person that we were going after hadn't been killed. But yes, there were plenty of deaths.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it was well executed. Was it legal though? I mean, because other countries have grounds for removing Donald from office because he's threatening the entire world order. Maduro was threatening Venezuela. I think for me, the biggest thing about Venezuela is, once again, no outcry. The world did not rise up as they should have, because that is not the way. You can think whatever you want to think about Maduro, but we had no right to do that. And let's face it, it was not for noble reasons. No. It was to take control of the country's oil production.
Well, Donnie
it was
told
not
us
about
that.
regime. He did, and it wasn't about regime change either, because the same Maduro's whole government is still in charge of things, to the extent that anybody's in charge of anything other than the new president of Venezuela, apparently, El Presidente Donald. So it was just another missed opportunity. This egregious act is committed by Donald and the Trump regime, and what are you going to do? Right. So I don't know. It's just that's why I'm telling you, because there was no pushback of any significant or coordinated kind. That's why he's back on Greenland.
Yes, and soon to be Panama. If you don't push back against Donnie, he continues to push forward. And Canada. But when he came out and said we're in the oil business, I thought he was going to put on his J.R. Ewing hat, and I swear to God, it sounded
Give it time.
It sounded like dialogue from Dallas. We in the oil business, boy. So I that frightened me. But so you think at the end of the day, what we're seeing, because I've talked to government officials in Germany, France, England, who are, and I've seen what the presidents and the chief officers in those countries have said about Donald. I think it was Macron who said, a bunch of den robbers destroying the world order. And it looks like it's Russia, China, and the United States trying to divvy up the world now. And certainly if Putin had been able to do what our military did in Venezuela, Zelensky would be in a hole in the ground or in a dank cellar somewhere. Mm-hmm. So, but you're right. It kind of removes the veneer of civility and culture, and it's like every person for themselves. But I did get some hope out of France, England, and Germany and what they said against Donald. But to your point, who else will push back?
We are going to see. I guess it depends on how seriously they are taking this threat. It depends on what he does and says. If I were the EU and Canada, I would be planning for the worst. So
that's, well, on that wonderful note, on that upbeat note, yeah. It's time for our emotional support moment.
Well, that wasn't it. I promise you, the emotional support moments are things like waves crashing on a sandy beach.
Yes, and I love those. Actually, the one that the last week that we had when it was the snow, and I'm going, this is what Greenland looks like when Donald's not around. But what do I know? Anyway, Mary, I'll let you plug anything you had mentioned. I didn't bring it up because I didn't know if you wanted to discuss your personal stuff. But if you feel comfortable doing it, you're welcome to do so.
Well, the best thing that happened last year, one of the two best things that's ever happened in my life is I got married to the love of my life and my best friend. So that has been quite extraordinary. It continues to be. And I literally cannot imagine going through what we're going through without her. It would break my brain if I had to think about that. So luckily I don't. So
well,
it's been quite amazing.
I will say, as someone who's been married for 42 years to my best friend, Mazel Tov, and it makes things go so much. I'm so happy for you because everybody deserves that happiness, and I love you like you're my sister, and you are, so when anybody can find that type of happiness, it makes life a lot easier to deal with, and a lot easier to laugh at.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
So plug what you want.
Everybody, please check out my Substack. It's called The Good in Us. And we're really trying to build it up over there because it's such a great community. It's a really good place to come and share and connect, as I said. Also, Mary Trump Media has a YouTube channel called the Mary Trump Media YouTube channel. I know, original. And yeah, those are, the main things you want to check out. Tons of videos dropping every day, writing posts over on Substack, doing Substack lives and interviewing people like Brian. So please check them out. Subscribe. It's free to subscribe.
There you go. And all subscriptions are free, but what the hell? We'll take whatever donations we can take.
Absolutely, we will, since the billionaires are ignoring us.
Yes, I like your idea. Bust up the media monopolies, and oligarchs, please give to local media. That's my plug for the day.
I like it.
With that said, this is Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Karem. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.